Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. I don't know if Tom Day, are you able to take roll?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, if you're ready, I can do that now.
Yeah, please do.
Speaker Reichman,
Here.
President Masterson,
Here.
Pro Tem Finch,
Here.
Vice President Wilborn,
Here.
Majority Leader Hawkins,
Here.
Majority Leader Alley,
Here.
Minority Leader Sawyer,
Here.
All right. Sounds like we have everybody here. We had just one item to discuss this morning, and that's the review the new executive orders 2101 and 2201 and 2202. And I believe Justin Witten is here to go over them with us. Justin?
Hi, good morning. I believe Will Lawrence is also on Chief of Staff to give a general overview.
Yeah, Speaker Reichman, if that's okay, I might take this, and then Justin is available to answer any more technical questions.
Yep, go ahead, Will.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the time this morning, and I think, as you all know, the governor yesterday declared an emergency and a very targeted one related to the staffing issues at our hospitals, skilled nursing facilities, and long-term care facilities. And so I will walk through the executive orders, and I'll point out kind of one key piece of this as we kind of get back into the KEMA conversations again. The declaration that the governor issued would be effective for 15 days, which would take us to 11:59 p.m. on Friday, January 21st. And that was an intentional part of this to cover the first 2 weeks of the legislative session. So I'll walk through these two executive orders, but the thought process here was these two executive orders give key flexibility to our hospitals, skilled nursing facilities, and long-term care facilities to utilize staff in some ways that are really important right now. And so what we're doing here is issuing these executive orders, and then what the governor is hopeful will happen is that the legislature can take these two orders, put them into a piece of legislation, and extend their expiration date out to whether it's beginning or end of March, that time frame, to give us plenty of time to get through the immediate surge, but not have a situation where we're coming back to LCC for a request for extensions of a declaration every 30 days. So that was kind of the thought process and why the governor did what she did yesterday. These two executive orders, Executive Order 2201 and 2202, do kind of what I just explained. It's really targeted towards staff flexibility. 2201 is more targeted towards the hospitals. And so a couple of key things that I will point out. And first, I guess I would say substantively, these executive orders are basically identical to what you would have seen during the pandemic. In the whereas clauses, there'd be some updated information in terms of numbers and stuff like that. But when you get into the actual sections, the intent was to not make any changes that weren't absolutely necessary. So we're keeping it consistent, and everyone has seen this language before. So in 2201, this is based largely on EO 2026 that was issued previously. And I'll point out there are a couple of technical pieces of language that I'll point to so you know where the change was. But the key here is that it gives the hospitals, for example, to use students who are enrolled in med school, nursing school, that nature, to be used in these facilities on a volunteer basis in ways that would be appropriate based on their education and training and experience. And under supervision to do what they need to do to free up some of our clinical staff to do things to help staff beds and things like that. I think one example that's been used is a lot of the COVID-19 testing right now. Clinical staff are being used to swab noses for the test. There are people who can be trained in short order to do things like that. That frees up our clinical staff to staff beds. And the big thing we're seeing right now with the surge is that while there are a lot of cases, and with the new variant, there's not as many hospitalizations and deaths from the Omicron variant. We're still seeing a lot of Delta out there, and our hospitals still have a lot of patients in their hospitals. But it's also wiping out staff who are in quarantine with breakthrough cases. So we don't have so many staff to staff beds. Less beds that we have staff means that if you have a car accident or a heart attack or something like that, you don't have access to those beds. So the intent here is to try to give hospitals and nursing homes flexibility to move some staff around and make sure everyone's doing things in a way that certainly doesn't diminish the quality of care, but allows hospitals to make sure they're getting people in and they're not sitting in a waiting room, in the ER for more than they have to be, and same for transfers and stuff like that. Same thing for military personnel and for personnel who have maybe recently retired and their licenses lapsed. This allows them a little bit quicker way to get back into those hospitals if needed, and for the nursing homes. And then the last thing I'd say is that it also allows, if you're licensed in another state, like if you're licensed on the Missouri side but not on the Kansas side, you can come over, be utilized under this executive order to do that type of work. And that's where I would point out just briefly the two technical changes that were requested in conversations with the Board of Healing Arts on EO 2201, Section 3, which is on page 4 of the executive order. The very last sentence was added. There was a conversation. What this section does is it allows you to come in and not have to go through the licensing process here in Kansas. But what we're not intending to do is waive any jurisdiction that the Board of Healing Arts would have with someone practicing medicine in Kansas. But we're also, they wanted us to make it clear that they do have jurisdiction. We're not trying to expand anything here. We're not trying to say they have jurisdiction that they may or may not have. So that language just clarifies that we're not touching that jurisdiction. Whatever jurisdiction they have under their statutes, they have, that's not modified here, with the exception of someone being able to practice without a license under this circumstance. So that tweak was made in there, but again, it's minor, and that was reflective of some of the conversations that I think also occurred during the legislative session when some of these bills were being considered. Likewise, and towards kind of the middle part of this, there's a sentence that says, provided that no such professional may practice if such profession is not authorized in the state of Kansas. Vice President Wilborn, I think this was something that at one point in the committee, you made a motion on the intent behind this. And so we captured that to make sure that, if you're a doctor practicing somewhere in Oklahoma, for example, or Missouri, you can come across in this scenario and practice as a doctor here. We license doctors, they're authorized to practice in Kansas, but there's some profession that Oklahoma or Missouri has that we don't have. We're not creating a new occupation that they can come and do things here that's not intended or contemplated. So just again, making sure that there's no interpretation of creating something new that doesn't exist. I'm just creating flexibility for staff. So I wanted to make sure to point that out. I think really that's kind of the high points on this that I just wanted to highlight, and then happy to answer any questions. The final thing that I will say is these are two very targeted, narrowly tailored executive orders to meet the situation in our hospitals and skilled nursing facilities and long-term care facilities. Governor has no intention of issuing any other executive orders. The intent here was to act in this moment, ahead of the legislative session, provide for this to happen now, but then turned over to the legislature and to work with the legislature to extend that out and then have the legislature have time to look at what may need to be done. And so that is the intent here in trying to address this, not taking any other actions, not sending in the National Guard anywhere or anything like that. That's the intent behind this. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd be happy to stand for any questions based on that.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Will or Justin?
Mr. Speaker?
Yes, Mr. Hawkins?
Yes, so it's not really a question for Will. Will, I think you did a great job of explaining it. I would say that these particular EOs are EOs that probably most of us felt pretty good about, even back during the original disaster declaration. In fact, I would say most of us, or many of us, feel like some of this stuff should be made permanent instead of just a part of a disaster declaration. We should be able to take large swaths of these two EOs and be able to make it more permanent to where you don't have to have a disaster declaration to make it work, which is, I would suggest to the legislature that we should look at that and try to move forward with something that'll make this a whole lot easier to where in the future, when this happens, we don't need a disaster declaration from the governor to do it. We just do it. So that's going to be my suggestion. And thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to share that.
Mr. Speaker, I had a question. This is Ty.
Yes, go Ty.
So, hey, Will, what date are you looking at that? So, for example, we're coming in on Monday, right? So to declare an emergency now versus just ask the legislature to act that first week and accomplish these things. What is it you're looking at that you felt necessitated the emergencies? My question, number one, versus just ask us to do that. Because we've shown in important situations we can act, like the polar vortex. We did that bill in 24 hours. But so that's question number one. Then two, is it intention if once we codify that into statute appropriately that there would be you'd rescind the emergency?
Thanks, President Masterson. I two things that I would say. First, to your first question, part of this is that what we're seeing, and I know there was a big press conference on Monday with actually, I'm not sure it's Monday, whatever day it was. It's already we're getting close to session. It feels like every day's Monday, it seems like, but that event certainly put a lot of information out there that explained exactly how bad the situation is with the hospitals right now. And we've been having similar conversations with the nursing homes for certainly, I'd say, over a course of at least a few weeks. And so as the governor's been watching this, it's become a bigger and bigger issue. And it became pretty dire over the course of this week. And so the reason the governor went ahead and took this action as opposed to waiting is as soon as these orders were effective, they could be utilized. So they're being utilized right now, which was really important. And this date, like I said at the beginning, takes us to the end of the day on January 21st. So it gives the legislature 2 full weeks to work on something and make it, on a more like I'm not say permanent basis, but a longer term basis. So that was kind of the rationale for the action there, is that it probably couldn't wait to get into middle of late of next week to get something through the enrollment process and all those things, when we can go ahead and do that now, but work with the legislature to do this. So we could, your second question, allow the declaration to expire and move forward with these two pieces, which were the ones that were needed. So that would be the intent, assuming that this can be fast tracked and taken care of in that time frame.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senate President. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Speaker, this is Rick Wilbur.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. If there's no other questions on this specific matter, I was wondering if Senator Sykes was missed on the roll call.
Mr. Speaker, she was missed, but she is on the virtual meeting.
Okay, very good. Want to make sure we didn't miss her.
Thank you for caring about me, Senator Wilburn.
Any other questions? All right, well, again, our role duty was to review. Obviously, do not need to take any action for this to be in effect. The last bill that we passed did allow this board the authority to revoke any order when we're not in session, which we won't be in session until Monday. I don't see any need for that. So, like these provisions will help our hospitals. It's temporary time of need, and seem like we're all supportive of that. Again, we have 2 weeks to put this in law. You know, the disaster only lasts for 15 days, and then the full body would have to extend. We're going to do everything we can to avoid having to do that. So we got a lot of work starting for us on Monday. Well, again, see you guys on Monday. Thanks for joining us. Meeting is adjourned.